Tell me about Sarah.
I always start presentations by saying, I wish I wasn't here. Back 5.5 years ago, my wife and I were just going to start living our life. We had 5 kids, and the youngest in November, so coming up tomorrow, had finished the high school certificate. So for the very first time, my wife and I were going to have time to ourselves. Having raised 5 kids, we'd never been overseas together, so we're going to visit my brother in February 2012 over in Singapore, where he lived. We said goodbye to my beautiful youngest daughter, Sarah, on the 15th of February 2012. We were actually going overseas on the 18th. She left home, and about an hour and a half into her journey, she was travelling down the Hume Freeway, about 8 kilometres south of the what we call the Big Dipper up in New South Wales, at Mittagong. Her car did what cars do every single day. It broke down, she lost power steering, she lost brakes, her engine stopped, and she pulled over into what was a breakdown lane that didn't meet Austroad standards. It was 1.5 metres wide. So we had 3 lanes built for movement of vehicles and nowhere for the protection of people. She was put in harm's way. She contacted the NRMA. They sent out roadside assistance and recognised her car would have to be towed. When the tow truck driver arrived, about 63 seconds after he arrived, we know that from the footage that was presented in court, a driver, young guy, not much older than my kids in actual fact, was driving an 8-tonne Pantech up a 3-degree hill. But he was distracted, and he's never admitted why he was distracted, but for 11.1 seconds he continued without looking ahead. While they were trying to set the vehicle up on the tow truck, this young gentleman, at just 7 metres from impact, raked the wheel so hard that it actually left imprints in the bitumen on the Hume, or in the concrete on the Hume. He ploughed into both, horrifically killing them. We weren't contacted initially, but my now youngest daughter, Beck, kept ringing me and saying she couldn't get in contact with Sarah. And I said, well, the Hume Highway is renowned for problems with mobile phones, so don't worry, she'll be okay. And I would have had 3 or 4 conversations like that. When I arrived home, I came home early because of just a little bit of concern, and there was a police car out the front, and I remember walking down thinking, oh, my son's car's parked around the other way, I better let him know so he doesn't get booked. I walked down to see 2 police officers and my family in tears. And I can remember falling to the ground, catatonic. Couldn't move. I could only say she's only broken down. My youngest daughter now, Beck, she was sitting there at her boyfriend's place, now her husband, and she saw the vision of Sarah's car in the tow truck from the Channel 10 helicopter being told that her sister had been killed. We thought that was the worst day of our life. It wasn't. The following day was, when we went to Goulburn Morgue and had to identify my beautiful 23-year-old daughter. We then went back to the road because I had to see where she was killed. And that's when the work that I've been doing for the last 5.5 years started, because that lane didn't meet specifications. I was working for RMS. I was a manager with RMS, and I was outraged to think people had been put in harm's way.
RMS is?
Roads and Maritime Services in New South Wales.
State Government Department.
Responsible for that very road. And from that point on, we thought we had to make a contribution to road safety. I was fortunate in that I had a bit of a background in policy for a very long period of time. But that was the moment when we thought no one should die on this road. At the personal level, I'm still in counselling, and I figure I probably will be for the rest of my life. Having to identify your beautiful daughter in pieces in a situation that was absolutely unnecessary. She should have been protected by that road. Fundamentally, even if that young gentleman who killed her, if that road had been built to specification, she'd be alive today. And the other part was, of course, he did the absolutely wrong thing. But as an individual, he wasn't a bad person. We all make mistakes.
You've met with him. How did that come about?
It was at his sentencing hearing in Parramatta. And the judge literally sentenced him after about a 45-minute reading. And he left the chamber with his associate, and we were waiting for the sheriff to come and get this young gentleman. He was standing there beside a glass partition, and he was belting his head against it. And his girlfriend, who was sitting beside him, was in tears. And again, Beck, my now beautiful young daughter, she walked over to comfort his girlfriend, and I instinctively followed her. And I looked at this young man, and he's basically the same age as my kids, and he was my son at that moment. He was just a young man who'd done a terrible thing. And I hugged him and forgave him at that moment. We're not people of hate, but we do believe the behaviours that we're seeing in our community need to change.